Hey everyone, welcome to Turned Out a Punk. I'm your host, Damian Abraham, and today on the show, Leo Fitzpatrick is here. Leo Fitzpatrick first burst onto the movie screens as Telly, one of the all-time great, terrifying cinematic villains of my young life. Telly was, of course, the one of the primary characters in the movie Kids. He was Leo. I mean, when I say this, was like 15 when he did that role. From there, he went on to do all sorts of other roles. Like he in this interview kind of downplays it, but I remember seeing him pop up in all sorts of things. I've always been a huge fan of him, and then to see him show up later on in The Wire was incredible. But Leo's done tons of other stuff other than just act, and he is kind of the first to say that. He is also a gallery owner of the incredibly cool gallery in New York called Public Access. They've got an Instagram page we're going to link in the bottom below. But he's someone who just has a lot of cultural impact that I don't think people necessarily talk about or appreciate sometimes. Like, he has been involved in cool shit since he was like 14. And so to get the opportunity to sit down and talk to him, that is something that, I've wanted to do for a very long time. Outside of this podcast, I've always wanted to meet Leo Fitzpatrick. And so thanks to your show producer and guest booker, my brother, Tristan Abraham, it is happening today. And my gosh, what a great conversation. Unfortunately, it would have gone, I think, way longer, but I had some work stuff to do after the interview, so it's not as long as it could have been. But Leo hopefully will be back. That's a bit of a spoiler alert for the end of the show. Leo's also an amazing DJ. You can check out some of the stuff he's done on Lot Radio, on the YouTube channel, all the shows. He's got ridiculous tastes in music, and I say that in the best way possible, like from like James Brown to Culture Side and all over the map. Check out anything this guy does. This guy is awesome, and I can't say enough good things about this brief but fun conversation that we had together. Anyway, you're going to hear in a second. Why am I talking about it? That's it. Check out Leo on Instagram and keep abreast of all the things he's up to. And that's it. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy Leo Fitzpatrick on Turned Out a Punk. Leo, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I've been really looking forward to this because I feel like I've been a fan of you for a very long time. And I feel like you're, to me, one of the all-time great cinematic villains as a young person. But there's a lot of other credits you got in there acting wise, a lot of other cultural experiences you have. So this is going to be a pretty fun conversation for me.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm a fan of the show, and yeah, I hope I can deliver.
Well, I got to start off the way they all start off, which is Leo. How'd you get into punk? Do you remember the first time you ever came across it?
Um, so so I would say that it was through my brother. I'm the youngest of five kids, and we grew up in a town called West Orange, New Jersey. Our parents are from Ireland, and there wasn't much culture in the house. I think there was like some Irish, like 8 tracks laying around, and that was about it. But through my brothers and sisters, I was exposed to all different types of music. They are all very different from each other. But my next oldest brother, Kieran, who's 5 years older than me, he was really into like metal and thrash and that sort of thing. Um, I couldn't even tell you the time frame, but I was probably, I mean, I was still in elementary school. And so you start out with like Metallica and Anthrax and I don't know, MOD, SOD, MDC, like all that stuff. But the way my family worked was because there was five of us and we didn't have much money. Whenever one of us was into a certain thing, the other four had to let him have it. So I kind of wasn't allowed to be into like more aggressive music because that was my brother's thing. right? And that was his identity, which in I'd say the late 80s, like it wasn't like a popular thing to be into like metal and punk, like he was definitely picked on and stuff and kind of an outlier. So uh but I always loved it. Like it was weird. And then through skateboarding. So my brother found music, I found skateboarding. And then through skateboarding, you're introduced to all types of music and all different types of culture. And you know, skateboarding thing, I've talked about it. You're generally like just searching for something. Um, you're it gives you the ability to escape whatever problems you have at home, and then you meet other kids. Like I thought I had it bad growing up until I met some other skaters, and I was like, holy shit, they have it even worse than me. And then you form your little crew and you go on from town to town, and eventually you make it to New York City or whatever big city is around you.
It's been interesting to watch as like a passive person that's not involved in the culture as skateboarding's transition from sort of this urban explorer thing for young people to a sport thing for young people over time. Because like you're right, like it was like most of the skater kids I knew growing up were just kids that were like kind of a little feral in the way that they could just kind of like run around and explore and just tear up the city. And it was like a real outlaw culture because you're skating in spots, and this is before they had ways to physically stop you in the architecture, so they're like physically trying to grab you off your skateboard. So it was like, yeah, it was like a very it was like a bad kid thing to do.
Oh yeah, and running from the cops and stuff was totally part of it. That was part of the excitement was just not even wanting to be accepted, just wanting to do your thing and kind of hang out with your friends. And like by the time I was 12 years old, I'd already got a job working at a skate shop called Cheapskates in South Orange, New Jersey. And I would generally take whatever money I made and buy skateboard stuff, and so I bought there was a team called Shut Skateboards, a New York City based company. And I bought this shirt. And that night I went out and I was skating a church, and the cops like kind of fucked me up and threw me in the back of their car, brought me to my mom's house. And, they had torn my shirt. They'd like roughed me up, and I was only 12 years old. And my mom, knowing I just bought this shirt because we didn't have many nice things, she saw that the cops were being a little aggressive, and she always had my back, which was cool. She let them have it and stuff. Uh, but yeah, like I don't know, like you also have to remember in the late 80s, early 90s, vert skateboarding had kind of died out. Street skateboarding was coming up, but it was still kind of some dark ages for skating. Like a lot of the people who had done it as a hobby or as a trend had kind of gone on to do other things. So it's really only like actual core skaters that were kind of sticking around at that time period, which I loved it way more back then than when it became a popular thing. Um, I don't necessarily mind the Olympic stuff and the kind of X Games and all that. It's just a different version of the same thing.
Yeah, like I you kind of see it happening right now with hardcore, where it's getting very popular, and the which is great because like more people can find out about this stuff that way, and it's like it's much more accessible. But then you risk losing it as a special place for kids that don't feel like they belong anywhere else.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I feel like now, and New York City is pretty interesting right now because it's so expensive. It is really uh, kind of divided the culture. You have a lot of your like frat boy tech bros, but then there's a really strong like punk anarchy scene happening as well. Um, And so that gives me hope. There's not as much diversity as there was in like the 90s and early 2000s, but there's still a lot of kids and DIY spaces that are like keeping the scene alive. And uh it's weird being the older guy that's kind of checking this stuff out, and just that's what gives me hope as like for the creative future of New York City.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about this stuff though. Like no matter how popular it gets, there'll still be a group of kids that want to do it because they have no other outlet, and they're going to find somewhere that lets them do it. And I think that's a great thing about punk, and I guess skateboarding too. Is like it doesn't matter if you're bad at it. You just do it.
Yeah, and like the one thing I loved about skateboarding is you can actually like meet your heroes, like it's more accessible than in other sports or things. And uh I feel like at a certain level the same is true with music. It's like you help load up the van, you help set up the gear, they help you put on your shows. It's very community based at the beginning. And like the other night there was some bands in town, and I went over to the squat where they were all like silk screening the shirts and dyeing them with coffee and doing that kind of thing. It was still really community based. And these were LA bands that had come to New York to play some shows. And you're like, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's the like this kind of continuum that's going to happen with it, because there's always going to be like a new generation that cuts off when it gets too popular. When it gets, there's a new generation that comes up underneath that still wants to do it completely DIY, that wants to do it their way. And that's a great thing about it. And there's sort of this perennial bloom of this culture, punk and hardcore culture. Kind of there's like always a group of kids that are like, yeah, silk screening their shirts or making their own patches, or
Yeah. And
I
like I see the art of the flyers kind of coming back a little bit, and these kind of actual tangible things, even if it's only to put on Instagram, they're at least like making it in the first place. It's not some AI generated image. It's like actually pink pen on paper, kind of you know, referencing the history of flyers and Raymond Pettibone and Nick Blinko and things like that, where it's like there's an aesthetic and a look to it that these kids are carrying on, which is great.
Well, it's interesting, especially in a city like New York, the relationship between art and punk, and art and just culture in general. Like if you look at graffiti culture and I guess skate art, or artists that were coming out of skateboarding, like it's really this sort of like art gallery scene that's kind of like also fueling this stuff, or at least bringing eyeballs to it from outside early on.
Yeah, again, it's gotten a little expensive to have as many like experimental spaces, but there there is this group of younger kids on the Lower East Side, and they basically just find abandoned storefronts or buildings. They break into them, they throw a little art show, and then throw a punk show, like all within one night. So it all happens over the span of like 5 hours or until the cops finally figure out what's going on. And they destroy these places. But at least they're fucking passionate about something. Like they're passionate enough to break in, to set up the art show, to set up the music show, to dance all night, and to get thrown out by the cops. Like to me, I can't hate on that. And generally, because I go to some of these things, the cops will kind of drive by like 10 times, kind of unsure of what's happening because uh it seems sketchy, but there's no way this possibly could be illegal because New York is so gentrified at this point. The cops must think it's just some sort of like rented out pop up or something until they figure out, wait, no, actually, this is illegal. and they don't want to work too hard, so they basically just break it up. They say, "All right, guys, like, uh, you're kind of causing a disturbance. Can you just leave?" Sort of thing. But by that point, the kids have had their fun, and if they're smart, they just kind of walk away and take the win.
Yeah. Did you ever go to ABC No Rio back in the day?
Weirdly, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I might have went once, but I was a little intimidated by that scene for sure. Like, I've always been kind of shy. I've always kind of uh sort of like knew my lane. Like, my my older brother, who I mentioned earlier, he was the type of guy who if I expressed interest in like Metallica, he'd be like, "Tell me how Cliff Burton died right now, or else you're a poser." And I'd be like, "A bus crash." He'd be like, "Where?" And I'd be like, "Sweden." So I've always like, I rarely wear band t-shirts. I don't want to be called out for not knowing my shit. And I'll generally revert back to this idea of like, I don't know anything. And that, I think, comes from my older brother constantly quizzing me on music. Um, so yeah, so I knew like ABC No Rio was like the real deal, and that maybe I didn't belong there. But I've been to like C Squat and Bullet Space and some of these other places that are part of that scene. ABC No Rio's coming back. They're rebuilding it right now. Um, and yeah, it's a great place that gives a lot of these kids yeah, just like a sense of community, which is kind of that's all a lot of these kids need, is like a sense of belonging. And the teenage years are pretty tough. You just need to get, I think, into your mid to late 20s. If you can survive that, then you're pretty good.
It's interesting you find that ABC No Rio intimidating because I find like a lot of the places that you probably were hanging out more intimidating. I guess that's being a non-skater, and I guess it feels like I would feel certainly like the parks where you were hanging out as a young person and like sort of the level of um I don't know aggression there. I would have thought would have been more intimidating to me than something like ABC No Rio.
Yeah, I mean, I probably just felt not a part of that community. And that's my own fault for not even trying,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, Also, I didn't really see a lot of shows growing up. I couldn't afford them. And so I went, there's a place in Hoboken called Maxwell's that's like pretty well known on the East Coast. And I sat on the curb in front of that place for so many shows that I wish I had gone to, I wish I had saw, but I just couldn't afford the $5 or the $10, so I would just skate out front. And you talk to people having a smoke, and that was your kind of way of trying to be a part of the scene, but not actually being able to afford it. And I think I was too probably shy to try to sneak in or anything like that. As you get older, you figure out how to like sneak into these things, and uh you'll get in there if you really want to get in there, you can get in there. But I was, again, pretty quiet, shy kid.
it it's interesting because you almost had to pick your specialization because like the story you're telling echoes Jeff Rowley's story too when
Hmm.
Jeff was on the podcast talking about he's like yeah I was at all these shows but I was skating out front of these venues while the show was going on because yeah not having enough money spending money on skateboarding like if you weren't like a super rich kid you would have to pick kind of what your thing was going to be like you were saying with your older brother you couldn't necessarily be into a bunch of different genres of music back then because a CD or even a record, right? They're like close to $20 each.
Yeah.
Like a t-shirt costs $20. Like God only knows how much Doc Martens were back then. And
Yeah.
all this stuff was fairly inaccessible. Like I think that's why I think like certain things that didn't require the uniform to me were always more appealing. Like I liked hardcore more than punk because like I can't buy bondage pants. I was also a chubby kid, so I would look terrible.
Yeah.
But like leather jackets and all that stuff was so expensive. Like you had to pick. where your money was going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And, for us, you're literally also just talking about food. Like, okay, we got literally a few dollars to last us the day. So your probably first priority would be to get like a 2 liter of iced tea or something, the biggest drink you could possibly find that you would carry around with you and everybody would just drink out of, and then maybe have some money for a slice of pizza or something like that. But yeah, there there just wasn't a lot of and it was pretty across the board, it wasn't just me, like nobody really had money. And so yeah, like again, like I remember I was friends with a kid who lived in the same town, and his brother was a metalhead and he was a skater. And I want to say that both our brothers got basses, and then he got a drum set, but I couldn't get the drum set, but I noticed there was a difference there. Like, oh, we don't have money to experiment with hobbies. You just you get to pick one thing. Um, and so yeah, it was, but I never felt like I didn't have money, or I never felt like I didn't that I wasn't exposed to things. Also, uh, my mom was like a single parent, like raising 5 kids, working night shifts. And so there was like a crazy amount of freedom there to where, you know, she would get home at 7 a.m. And so as long as you were home by 7 a.m., you could do whatever you want, kind of a thing. And supposedly my brothers and sisters were supposed to be watching me, but they were off doing teenager shit. So I could do whatever I wanted. Um, so it was great. And I think my mom just kind of like sort of trusted us and hoped we wouldn't get into too much trouble. And we were kind of self-sufficient because that's all we knew. And then with skating, you're generally around older kids. Like, there's always the kid who drove, like the kid who was at least 17 or 18. And they were the kids kind of turning you on to cool music and all that stuff, um, which is great. There were cliques and there were people like, oh, you're just like some little scrub or whatever. But there were also really great older kids who didn't judge you because of your age or your background. You always had the foundation of skateboarding, like that thing. And then because of Thrasher and stuff like that, you were kind of all drawing from the same inspiration and music and everything, so like I think my first concert, I was with like 3 or 4 other skaters, and I want to say we went to a club in Newark, New Jersey called, I think it was called the Pipeline, and we saw My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. I think that was my first concert. And of course, we all took acid. I mean, I'm probably 14 at this time, 15, something crazy. And then we get into a crazy car chase, and you think, is this the acid? Like it obviously heightens the experience, but it was a full-on car chase through the streets of New Jersey, lights out. You're just racing at like God knows however fast. And it's insane. Like, I have a son and God forbid he does that sort of stuff, but that was the kind of like thing we had. And it was great. I still see My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult whenever they come to New York. Like there's something about Daisy Chain for Satan. Like that's like a core memory for me is hearing that song. Um,
Where are you going to get 90s acid now? Like that was a different time.
yeah. And again, it comes down to the financial thing. It was like $5, right? So you're like, all right, $5 for 8 hours. That seems like a great investment. like let's go. So it was like, yeah, it was like that or like a 40 ounce. And I don't know. It's weird trying to get fucked up as a young kid.
It definitely, I think that I never really liked drinking. So when I hit acid, I was the same way. I'm like, oh my God, it's affordable, it's effective. This is what I need to do. And actually now in Vancouver, there is an acid store where
Oh, wow.
you can go buy acid and it's
And
very
is it like weed where they have like different strains or like,
different intensities.
right,
There's some sort of measurement that I guess is based on how much of the LSD is actually in the solution on the
right.
hit, and I guess they've got like different strength levels, and you can also microdose off the bar. So I did like 3/4 of a hit of acid before we played a show in Vancouver, and it was one of the best shows I think I've ever played in my life. I was feeling great on stage that night. But yeah, there's the so it's coming back, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't the way I am now, I don't think I would experiment too much, but yeah, all in moderation, you know.
Yeah,
It was funny when I noticed all these like kind of like housewives and stuff like starting to take mushrooms and shit, and like microdosing became like a term. And I was like, that's what we were doing 20 years ago, you know.
yeah.
Um, so it's just funny that it kind of became trendy to microdose, but like in a very suburban way, you know, like where it's like, wait, you're like, we're talking about this at like school drop off and stuff. Like
In
this is
in Canada, post legalization, I think the sort of wine mom stereotype has definitely been replaced by the pen mom stereotype.
the pen mom.
Yeah, those like vaporizer pen shaped vaporizers that
It's like weed. It's like
weed.
THC.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they're just all all around right now. It's a very pervasive part of Canadian culture. These pens at this
Right.
point.
Yeah, and hey, whatever gets you through the day, you know. That was the one thing. I was never a weed guy. I think I was just easily got paranoid, and I liked. It's weird to say I liked being in control because uh, I don't know how much weed differs from acid in that department, but yeah, weed was never my thing, like ever. Even when I was 14, it wasn't my thing. Uh, so yeah, I don't know.
When did you start going into the city?
When I was 12. So, I probably started skateboarding maybe 8, 9 years old, something like that. And you start going to the other towns and meeting other kids, and some of them are a little older and stuff. And this is sort of the heyday of the Brooklyn Banks. This is when hundreds of kids from all over Long Island, Connecticut, and all these places would show up at the Brooklyn Banks. And so so we would have our little crew from New Jersey, from towns like Montclair, Glen Ridge, Clifton. There'd be like 5 or 6 of us. And then I remember you would take the bus to the path. So you would take the bus for about probably 30 minutes or something. And then the path was like another 10 or 15 minutes. And it cost you about $2. And you would get off at the World Trade Center. And then the Brooklyn Banks is a really short, I want to say like 10 blocks from World Trade Center or something. It's really close. And I don't know, it's like there's like so the Brooklyn Banks is on the Manhattan side of the Brooklyn Bridge. And so you have to kind of go under the bridge, which is dark and whatever. And then you kind of come into this light and you see the Brooklyn Banks and you're like, holy shit. It's like the Garden of Eden or something. You're like, look at this. And Um, and so you had skaters, you had BMXers, but you also had people that were living in the base of the bridge, like homeless people and stuff. And it was just chaotic and it was fantastic. Like, I remember, so by the time I was 12, 14, like between 12 and 16, I was going to the city like a lot. And then I would go back to like middle school, high school, or whatever, and all these kids would be like, "Damn, I can't believe you like go to New York City like on the regular." And I'd be like, "I can't believe you don't. It's right there. Like it's so easy to go to." And it was really hard to kind of stay focused on like school and stuff in like small town New Jersey after I was exposed to New York. I was just sort of like, I'm out of here as soon as I can get out of here, sort of a thing. And then you start meeting city kids, and so your crew is just kind of building and building and building. Um, and and then from the city, you start going to Philadelphia and Washington D.C. and your community is just growing. And in skateboarding, there's a term like don't be a kook. Like a kook is the worst thing you can be in skateboarding. At least that was my generation's term. And as long as you weren't a kook, you could kind of like hang anywhere, like people were pretty cool. You definitely saw a lot of fights and this and that. And after you let somebody try your board once, you never do it again because that's just their way of saying, "Can I steal your board?" Like, "Oh, let me try your board." And then they skate down the street. You're like, "What the fuck? Oh, they just stole my board." Like, um, so you just learn, you learn to mind your business and don't don't be too braggadocious and don't snake people and kind of know the pecking order. And then we can all coexist. Um, So that was, to me, what was great about skating. And I sort of liked being from New Jersey. I liked being like the underdog because city kids didn't like New Jersey kids. But, Jersey had a lot of really good skaters. Um, from like V, Mike Vallely to Tom Grholski. There's a bunch of guys. Mike Kepper. There was a lot of guys from Jersey that were great. And then we had my generation of guys, which is like Bobby Pulio and Tim O'Connor and Pancho Moeller and people like that could hold their own against city guys, but they would never be considered like on the same level simply for the fact that they were from New Jersey. And we were like kind of okay with that. Like, oh, we'll never be dope. We'll always just kind of be like the guys from Jersey.
Yeah, I find there's like a mentality in New Jersey that you see in hip hop from New Jersey, punk music from New Jersey, like as you're saying, skateboarding from New Jersey, where there's like I don't know, like so much is in relationship to what's happening in New York, or not wanting to be confused with what's happening in New York, or standing in opposition to what's happening in New York. Like it's a really fascinating thing to kind of like see how it percolates in different places.
Yeah. And I think it's like a very healthy attitude to be like, yeah, I'm not trying to be a part of your thing. Like we like what we have here. Um, like one of the best music shows I've ever seen. I think I saw like Lightning Bolt play at like a VFW hall in Pittsburgh, and it was fucking incredible because I don't know how often these kids from Pittsburgh get to see bands like Lightning Bolt. If it was in New York, everybody would be like cool guying it and like not really moving and just kind of like, yeah, this is cool, but whatever. But in Pittsburgh, these kids for that night were going fucking nuts. And, you know, I feel like sometimes New York can be a little too cool for school and not really appreciate what it has and the access to things that you get, there's almost too much happening all the time, you know. Um, so you kind of start to just take it for granted, which is like it's kind of lame, you know.
There's definitely periods in New York historically where you look at it and like all these different cultural cylinders start firing at once. And like obviously like the very storied sort of late 70s into the really early 80s with the rise of like hip hop happening at the same time as you have punk and graffiti and breakdancing and like just so much stuff happening at that moment. And I feel like the moment you're kind of coming to New York going into like the mid 90s and there's like amazing art stuff happening, obviously amazing skateboarding stuff happening, really cool punk and hardcore stuff happening. Like I'm always mystified that people are so fascinated by that meet me in the bathroom
Yeah, yeah,
era because that
yeah,
feels like after the gold rush to me.
yeah. Which I was definitely around for that time
Yeah.
period. So yeah, like when I first, well, so I have like a weird relationship with New York. So when I was young, when I was 14 to like 16, I was kind of just like an observer. I would come in, I'd skate, you'd go by CBGBs, and you'd like kind of check it out, but you wouldn't really go in. Um, a lot of it was almost like research. Like, all right, like I know about these things. I'm not quite there yet as a person to actually go to these places, but I'm gonna go sit in front for a little while and people watch, which is always super fun in New York. And then so about I guess like 14 is when I really started hanging out in the city a lot, going to the Brooklyn Banks. There was almost like a rhythm to it. You would go to the Brooklyn Banks or the Seaport, which is South Street Seaport, and then maybe like around like dinner time or whatever, you'd go to Astor Place, which was like literally a curb in the middle of the street, but it was like a big hangout. And then at nighttime, you would go to Union Square and just kind of, it was still just sort of hanging out. Um, and so that was sort of like the routine. And, whatever happened, happened. And I find it funny now that kids are very, they romanticize like the early 90s and stuff. And uh, I'm like, I honestly think the only difference is like we didn't have a phone. So we just had to leave the house. Like that was it. We didn't spend any time looking for what was happening. We were out there like searching for it or creating it. Um, like I honestly think like that's like a big difference. It's just this idea of not having this distraction and needing like if you wanted to know what was up, you had to leave the house. Like that's all there was to it. Um, so yeah, like more people were definitely tapped into the music scene than I was, but I was definitely around it. And then I would make kids when I was 16 is how old I was when I made that film. And it was really tricky being a guy from New Jersey now representing New York. And New Yorkers reminded me of that all the time. Like, you ain't even from New York, and here you are starring in a movie about it. Like, what the fuck is that about? About this very sacred, special little scene within New York, too. Like, how the hell did you get to be the guy? And I kind of understood where they were coming from. I was like, shit, yeah, you're right. I have no idea how I ended up here. And so I got a lot of backlash for the movie. And then I would move to London when I was 18, I think. And it would take me a few years to get back to New York, which is where kind of my music now we're like a little bit pre meet me in the bathroom thing. That's when I would really find my people in New York. And music and art would become more of the focus than skateboarding.
Was that kind of Beautiful Losers era?
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Alleged Gallery, Aaron Rose's gallery, has a lot to do with my outlook in general. It was such a special place. And I think financially it was kind of a mess. And, but he did a lot of great shows and really kind of broke down the walls between like what is art and what is skateboard art. I mean, he kind of also put it in a box a little bit. It's a strange relationship. Um, because everybody he was showing are artists first, whether or not they chose to skateboard or surf, that shouldn't like discount the art they make, but sometimes it does, which is unfortunate.
Don't you think it also sometimes empowers the art they make? Like, I certainly know skaters that want art because they know it's another skater making it. Obviously,
Sure.
not maybe discounts in the art world. So you're that's more your world, obviously, than
Yeah,
mine. But I
yeah.
mean, by the same token, I find it also brought so many people into art in a weird way. That thing that were skateboarders first and didn't want anything unless it could be identified as part of skateboarding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. You got guys like Mark Gonzalez who are, uh Mark can draw anything on a napkin and somebody will want it. Like Mark is larger than life. He's like um, but then I feel like certain people have had trouble breaking into the like more mainstream art world because of their association with skateboarding or surfing or these other things, which is kind of unfair, but that's I mean, it's very uh like a very small problem. It's not like a huge uh red mark on their record or anything that they skateboarded. But I just feel like sometimes people can get trapped in that idea of like, oh, skateboard artist, which I think like, it's Ed Templeton is much bigger than skateboarding. He just happens to still own a company and was super influential in the whole thing. And you got guys like Ed Templeton and Mark Gonzalez and Neil Blender, a few of these guys who were like the first to kind of create their own graphics and you know, bring their own sort of vibe to the companies that they were creating or working with at the time, and and kind of help shape the future of skateboarding. But I think, you know, uh I don't know. Ed is so much bigger than skateboarding, and a lot of these guys are. So I just hope they get recognition out from the mainstream as well.
Yeah, and as I said, like this is much more your world than mine. I think Ed also created a new archetype for, I mean, like outside of sort of like major urban centers for kids that were kind of picking up on skateboarding. Like he gave someone like, oh, I could be a skateboarder and also be like an artist. Like I can be
Yeah,
this person. Like it was a new path was created in his
I
way.
mean, all of all of my best friends to this day have skateboarded at some point. Like it. If you think about it, you're just looking at architecture different. You're like looking at magazines, you're listening to music. It just kind of like helps you find your creativity. You know, when your body stops letting you skateboard, you can channel what you've learned and apply it to other things, whether it be photography or filmmaking or painting. Um, of course, uh, like basically when Spike Jones went from being like a photographer for like BMX magazines and stuff to now he's directing music videos for Sonic Youth, and there's Jason Lee, and you're like, holy shit, that's a win. That's a win for all of us. um I remember there was a small section in Thrasher that whenever there was like skateboarding in mainstream media, they would like show it in Thrasher because it was so rare to see skateboarding like advertised in something other than a skateboard magazine. Generally be like on a cereal box or something. But it was skateboarding was pretty underground at that point. So to see the people that we knew of because of skateboarding blowing up kind of in more mainstream media meant like, oh, now everybody's kind of paying attention. And now everybody sees that we're not all just fuck ups, that there is something here. And then so my peers who I met in New Jersey growing up skateboarding, like a lot of them would become kind of well-known New York City artists. A photographer named Ryan McGinley, he was a skater. This painter named Dan Colin was a skater. Nate Lohman, who's a friend of mine, was a skater. Dash Snow was a skateboarder for a little bit. And it's just this like kind of shared mindset. It's like, I think just certain people are drawn to skateboarding, and then those people are kind of drawn to each other. And so whether or not you still skateboard, skateboarders are generally like a curious bunch. And so you find other curious people, and you're there for the conversation and for this like idea of sharing, like, oh, what are you into? What have you been listening to? What have you been watching? Um, and so yeah, and you can cut me off at any time.
No, it was
I'm
awesome.
very, I talk too much.
I
But
listened
so,
intently.
so basically, after I made kids, I was uncomfortable being in New York City because I was like this bad guy. Nobody knew if the movie was real or fake. I was an easy target. I was still just kind of like hanging out on the streets. And so I don't know how I did it. Um, but like I said, my parents are from Ireland. So I was able to get an Irish passport. And I don't know what I think I thought I was just going to flee the country or something. I don't know. But somehow I either had enough money left over from kids, which we only got paid 5 grand. And this is probably a year later. So I don't know how I could have had money left over. But I was like, I'm going to go to London. I didn't know anybody in London. I didn't have a single connection. I don't know why I picked London over Ireland. Uh, but I went to London and I stayed in a youth hostel for 2 weeks. And I remember like hiding my passport because there was like three other strange men in this room. And like, I'm this 18-year-old kid with basically a skateboard and a backpack. And at some point, I went to Slam City Skates in Covent Garden when Rough Trade was still in the basement. Like, I didn't even know how much cool shit I was around at that age. Like, now I would rather be going to Rough Trade than the skate shop. But back then, I didn't realize like how special Rough Trade was. So, so I went to Slam City and I met a guy. I was like, hey, you want to go skating later? And we went skating, and then that became my roommate for the next year, a guy named Seth Curtis. And now I'm in London and I'm being introduced to all this like drum and bass culture and going to like metalheads and like Goldie's parties and things like that. And um, I just remember everybody asking about like, where's Charlie? And I had no idea what the fuck they were talking about. I was like, who the hell is it? Why is this guy Charlie so popular? Like, that's how green I was. Um, and so again, I'm just like curious. I'm like, dude, all right, drum and bass seems pretty intense. Like, let me check this thing out. I would go anywhere. I would go to jazz clubs. I would do anything. I was just a curious kid. Um, so yeah, then from London, I would live in LA for 2 years. And I was living off Fairfax on Genesee, which is like 1 or 2 blocks in. And this is before the whole Fairfax explosion. This is when like there was a club there called Largo that Elliott Smith would play all the time. We would go to Spaceland a lot to see shows in Silver Lake. Um, now I'm getting more introduced into like music and stuff. I was hanging out at that time. We were still like making zines and stuff and like just sort of contributing to the culture a little bit. There was a collective of kids. Fuck, what were they were called something.
What
Uh,
was the smell going at that point?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because so now I'm in LA and weirdly there was this collective. Fuck, what are they called? But Dean Spunt, who would be in Wives and No Age, he was part of this collective. And
Okay,
they were
yeah.
all vegans. And they all lived in this shitty little apartment. And they kind of all like hung out together. And then Jenny Lewis and the Rilo guy, Kiley people were there. Riley, Riley,
Rilo
Kiley,
Kiley.
Rilo Kiley, yeah. So they were all around, and like LA had its little indie scene going. And then because Rilo Kiley was on Saddle Creek, you had like a lot of the Nebraska guys like Connor Oberst and people like that kind of around. So that was a weird sort of detour in my musical path, was that I fell in with all those people in LA. Um, and then I would meet a girl and we'd move back to New York. And the first kind of person I met in New York that I hadn't met before was this guy named Brian DeGraw. And Brian DeGraw uh, was in a band called Cranium, and then he started a band called Gang Gang Dance. And so Brian and me hit it off right away. And Brian was kind of friends with Harmony. They'd had a musical project called Sob Songs, and everybody was just experimenting. And then Brian would introduce me to like Black Dice, Animal Collective, um, ARE Weapons was, I think ARE Weapons is one of the longest running New York City bands. Like they've been around forever. And Brian had met them. There was a DC element where they all maybe went to college in DC. And so they all came out of like the Fugazi era DC thing.
Yeah, do you know
And
Jason Green from Panthers? And anyway, he's like around. Orchid was
oh
his
yeah,
band before
yeah,
that and stuff. But yeah, that kind of like era of New York, just pre, I guess, the Strokes kind of explosion.
yeah.
There's
And
a
I remember the Strokes explosion. And so it's funny because as the honestly, I don't think I've ever seen the Strokes. It was like a very divided city. Like I was with the weirdo art school kids, and the Strokes, you knew you would see some pretty girls if you went to a Stroke show. Like that was for sure. But at some point, the pretty girls started coming to Black Dice shows, and they were in for a real fucking shock. Like Black Dice was so fucking loud. And even early Animal Collective shows were pretty chaotic. And you'd see all these models and just kind of like curious people. And then the music would start, and immediately half the room would leave. It was just too intense. I think like the Locusts were definitely around at that time. And Black Dice and Animal Collective coming from like the RISD Providence scene, like they brought a whole new weird energy to the city. And like that shit was so great. And again, like Lightning Bolt, Thunder House, like that whole Providence thing coming to New York was super helpful. And then, at that same time, you have like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs being formed and uh bands like that. There was a bar. So
Max Fish.
Brian, no, Max Fish is super important. But and Max, so Mercury Lounge was around the corner from Max Fish. So a lot of the bands would hang out there before after shows. And Max Fish was pretty safe. Like nobody really bothered you. Didn't really matter who you were. Everybody just kind of minded their business. It was bright, it was big. Uh, so you could like I know there's like stories of like Johnny Depp hanging out there and James Gandolfini and Elliott Smith you'd see there a lot.
Didn't
Um,
didn't Joshua Jackson get jumped there? I think we
probably. Uh, but so did a lot of other people. So
yeah,
like that's how fair game it was. It
yeah.
didn't matter who you were. But so there was a so Brian DeGraw would kind of introduce me to DJing, right? Where he's like, "Hey, I'm DJing this party or DJing this bar." And I was like, "Wait, what? You get to drink for free?" Like that blew my mind. Like the DJ gets to drink for free. And he's like, yeah, and I make like $100 or so. I was like, wait, what? Like it was like some hack that I'd never heard of before. Where I was like, so you get to pick the music, drink for free, and get cash at the end of the night? Like fucking sign me up. And so there's a bar called Plant Bar, and it was the guy who used to run like Cine, where like Jeff Buckley would play. Um, a lot of these bar owners owned a couple different bars for like kind of whatever your musical taste would be, sort of a thing. So he owned this bar called Plant Bar. We all started hanging out there. And this was the type of place every week something would get stolen. It was just kind of like it depended on if it was your week or not. Like you just knew something was getting stolen every week by like some locals who saw this as like a place where like weirdo white kids hung out. So they would like the locals would just come in, have a drink, steal something, and leave. And it was kind of all like kind of understood. And they were so good at stealing that once I was DJing with CDs, like this is how long ago it was, and they actually stole my book of CDs while I was DJing. That's how good these guys were at stealing. Like I cue up a song and then I turn around like, wait, where the fuck did my and but so strangely, everyone who worked in that bar would go on to form the Rapture. It was Luke and Vito and Gabe. And so now you have this whole thing happening in DFA records, right? So, like, and between like DFA records and Vice magazine, and there was like this moment in the 2000s, which I think like Meet Me in the Bathroom touches on it and stuff, but unless you were there, it was like insane. Vice had so much money and was so I mean, I guess the word that comes to my mind is like arrogant. They were so full of themselves and ballsy that they would just throw these crazy parties. Um, and there was a lot of still nightclubs downtown. There was whatever you were looking for, you could find for sure. Um, so, at some point, a lot of that has moved out into Brooklyn and Queens, and it's a little harder to find. Spaces are smaller. Um, but yeah, and also the musical landscape, like uh just as far as like what DJs were playing and stuff, there was a lot of post-punk. Brian and Ben Cho and Paul Sevigny had started Smith's Night, which became a big deal in New York, which was a night that was all based on Morrissey and The Fall and Sparks and any kind of thing that fell under this kind of Morrissey world, New York Dolls, things like that. So it was cool. As a DJ, nobody ever really told you what to play. So you could kind of play anything as long as people sort of dance to it. There's a bar called Lit that a lot of people hung out at because it was kind of one of the last good dives. This is even post Mars Bar. Um, and all this kind of sounds insidery, but maybe somebody
Oh, that's
understands the references. But
I love this kind of era too, because like especially you brought up Vice there, and I I I probably saw Kids, and then maybe a year later, Vice started coming out. Like it feels like very much like the same time period to me, and just part of my cultural awakening during that time
Yeah,
period. But like, I remember getting the first issue of Vice still when it was called Voice, and it was like a Frank
right.
Kozik cover, and it was like this Montreal thing, and it was like the edgy Montreal magazine, and it was like this legendary story where the guys who ran Vice got beaten up in Montreal, and then they got this offer to kind of move the whole thing to New York. So they move everything to New York, and it was like it was so bizarre to watch this thing that was very marginal in Canada, popular but marginal, go
Mhm.
to America and then just become this. I don't like it was so big for a
Yeah.
time. Like it was crazy. I ended up working doing stuff with them shortly after the period we're talking about, but like just how big it got versus it's contracted considerably at this point.
Yeah.
But that moment where it was like, holy geez, like this has gotten out of hand.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and I think Vice, they kind of liked being fuck ups, and so we knew everybody who worked there, like everybody from Shane and Gavin and Sharush all the way down to Jesse Pearson and Leslie Arfin and and the magazine always felt like the core of Vice. When it became a media company and Vice TV, you kind of lost a connection to it. But Vice magazine at a particular time, I don't know of any other magazine you kind of like waited for it to come out. And you sort of like, oh, what's Vice gonna do now? Let's get straight to the do's and don'ts and this sort of a thing. Um, it had a real cultural impact, and now I think it's easy to make fun of, but back then it was a force to be reckoned with. It's like nobody knew what to do about Vice. Like there was no controlling it, containing it. It was just a mess. And like a beautiful big mess. And then I don't know, maybe they just wanted to get bigger, and we wanted them to stay this kind of like small time funny magazine, and as it grew we kind of lost connection to it. But uh but yeah, there's some. I would imagine if you open up the right time period Vice today, it would still make you laugh. Like there's some pretty funny shit in there, you know.
It's also interesting how interconnected it is, where it's Spike Jones that comes in and says, you got to start filming these articles, and that
Mhm.
gives rise to Vice TV, which eventually begets the Vice media explosion. Like it's always these same sort of players that wind up.
And like so I think it goes further back than that, right? Because you have to imagine that the founders of Vice magazine knew about Big Brother magazine,
Oh,
right?
definitely, yeah.
And how basically uh Jackass forms out of the Big Brother videos and CKY and like Bam's videos, the Camp Kill Yourself videos, right? It's like, okay, let's just take the skits, get rid of the skating. We're just going to take the skits, edit them down, form a TV show out of them, and that will become Jackass. And so now you have guys like Johnny Knoxville becoming like full on rock stars, and Bam himself, um, and so it's weird. I've been very lucky to see how these like small things grow over time and turn into these uh kind of massive cultural shifts. Like I always think like I don't know, I always thought like Jackass kind of like ruined television and movies.
I think it
It
ruined
it
humanity.
it dumbed it down so much to the point like my kid's not aware of Jackass, but like I really hope that he doesn't like kick his friends in the nuts for a laugh, and I think we've probably gotten way more extreme than that. But like I remember the Johnny Knoxville article in Big Brother where he shot himself wearing a bulletproof vest, and he shot himself like this, it's crazy. And Big Brother, what Rocco did with World Industries, I think like really like it ripples throughout culture. Like Rocco and World Industries, like that shit, like you might not know it's Rocco or World Industries, but you can see it spread way further than just skateboarding and Spike Jones and all of this.
Well, it's interesting when you look at the Jackass guys individually, that they're all punk, coming out of punk and skateboarding, but very different sides of it. Like Steve-O was a straight edge kid going to Gorilla Biscuits
Hmm.
concerts when he lived in England.
Yeah,
Danger Aaron was going to Melvin shows in the Pacific Northwest.
yeah.
Jason was going to like Epiphat, kind of Southern California punk shows. Apparently Knoxville was also going to some sort of punk shows around then too. It's like it's all these guys kind of coming out of punk rock that, as you're saying, ruined TV, as I'm saying, maybe ruined humanity. But it's all like once again this sort of like DIY, anyone can do this shit attitude of skateboarding and punk that brought these guys and allowed these guys to kind of create this like nightmarish world of entertainment.
And it's also like, when you come out of skating and stuff, I think it's pretty understood that sometimes like the slam is better than the make. Like
The Unsane video,
holy
the
what?
Unsane scrape video.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, that's why the toy machine video like was so big. The Welcome to Hell video was a lot of that had to do with the slam section because it's so gnarly and the stuff they're trying is insane. But you also kind of understand, right? Like, all right, so I just got fucked up, right? Like I tried this trick, didn't work out. I got fucked up. But like that's it. That's as fucked up as I'm gonna get. Okay, well at least now I know what that feels like. So going into Jackass, you're like, all right, this is gonna fucking hurt. But as long as we get it on tape, then it's worth it. You know. So I think they kept stepping it up and getting more and more hurt. But like in the beginning, it was just sort of like, yeah, it's gonna suck for a couple of minutes, or maybe I break my arm or something. But it wasn't any worse than skateboarding anyway. I mean, the shooting yourself is pretty stupid, but sitting on a chair full of tacks, you're like, oh, I mean, a lot of that shit was kind of like Tom and Jerry. It's like very juvenile. What can we think of to get the biggest laugh, kind of thing, and it worked. I mean, obviously. Yeah.
See, like I'm from a generation or so before the Jackass kind of phenomena. So for me, my defining film was Kids.
Mhm.
Like I think a year younger than you, 2 years younger than you. So when that movie came out, like my friend's dad wrote, it was an editor of a film magazine here back then, and he wrote an article, a review of Kids, and he's like, I think every parent should take their kid of this age to see this movie and discuss the movie with them afterwards, which I really agree. Because for me, it was like I was the perfect age to see it because it really did have like a traumatizing impact on me. But it's interesting, the generation a year or so younger than me that I don't think was able to process it. I think for them, not that it was like a how-to guide, certainly on the more heinous levels, but it became much more like an aspirational, like a way of exporting that New York skateboarding culture to everyone in the same way that Decline of Western Civilization exported that Southern California hardcore kid
Yeah,
vibe to everyone afterwards.
yeah,
Like I feel like the kids, like everyone around me was changed by that film very profoundly.
yeah. And it's weird because I still meet kids that are like, "Hey, that's the reason I moved to New York." And I'll be like, it was sort of a cautionary tale. Yeah, I feel like its its influence has only grown in a weird way, where that it almost seems like that sort of New York doesn't exist anymore. It's harder to find. When it's everything's still there. It's just been gentrified a little bit, or locations have kind of shifted, sort of a thing. But yeah, I don't, it's too close for me to sort of talk about in any kind of like intelligent way because I feel like kids are still have their scene. They just want to romanticize that shit. But I feel like they romanticize everything that's like 30 years before their time. It's like us, like me romanticizing Darby Crash and fucking like the screamers and fucking everything that was happening in LA, or even more so, like everything that was happening in San Francisco with like Survival Research Lab and Flippers and the Mutants and stuff like that, where I'm like, that's even more cuttier. That's even weirder. Like LA's too
Normal.
music.
Yeah, to
Like
industry.
where San Francisco, you really have to be a diehard to try to start to do something there. Even though it has its history within music. Um, So yeah, I don't, it's, I wish, I mean, my kid's 9. So at some point he might be able to explain to me even though he is my kid, he'll be able to explain to me the impact that that movie had. Because for me, everything outside of the sex was like pretty normal shit. Like the fight was normal, the hanging out was normal, the smoking weed was normal. The only thing was that that character was very different than who I was. Uh, but if you like notice in the film, I don't smoke weed. I like drink or something, like maybe take a sip
The
of a beer.
40, yeah.
But I was like totally sober at that point. Like, I was a 16-year-old, like kind of straight edge kid. Like, um, so the character I play is very different than the person I was. And then I always kind of moved forward. I never wanted that film to define who I was. And I knew it was a big reference for a lot of people as to who I was. So, like, how do I get out of that? What do I do to contribute to culture in other ways so that this is not the only thing that defines me? And I don't think that really happened until I did The Wire. Was like when people are like, holy shit, that's the guy from Kids. I guess he really does act, or he's an actor or something. I don't
Well,
know.
you say that, but you had like a lot of credits I found in the early 2000s. Like I would see you pop up in Serendipity, shot in my hometown of Toronto, but like I'd see you pop
Yeah,
up in different things and I'd be like, oh my God. Like I knew you as an actor, Law and Order Criminal Intent. Like I'd see you pop up in things where I'd be like Leo Fitzpatrick. Like to me, I always thought of you as an actor. And then I thought it was so great when The Wire did happen that you got like the sort of like extended run on that
yeah.
legendary show, obviously.
I mean, everything, like all the cool shit I've done comes out of being like a failed actor. Like, like every everything I've done within music or within like art world stuff, that's just because I couldn't sit around waiting for the phone to ring with an acting job. Like, and I'm such, I understand my voice is a little weird. I'm not like typically good looking kind of a thing. It's the jobs are not going to be lined up for me. It's has to be the perfect fit. Okay, we need a mute rapist. Let's call Leo Fitzpatrick, kind of a thing. Um, so there was a lot of time in between to experiment with other things. Okay, I'm going to DJ and I'm going to start an art gallery and I'm going to do different things. And I think all of it was important. Like there, I don't think I ever knew what I was doing at the time in real time, but the older I get, the more it makes sense. And this kind of it's created a more kind of well-rounded understanding of like who I am and what I can offer the world. And I always thought the more I lived, the more I could bring back to acting whenever it happened, right? Like if I just sat around waiting for a job, I wouldn't have the same life experiences. So as long as I get out in the world and I'm seeing things and doing things, maybe there'll be a job down the line that requires that sort of knowledge. So it's good to be busy, is all I'm saying, you know. And then like eventually I would work with Jonah Hill. He'd done some TV show, and Jonah was a skate kid. And I didn't know that. This is before his movie had come out, the mid 90s movie and stuff. And I don't think you typically look at Jonah Hill and think skateboard kid, but he knew what he was talking about, like Santa Monica Courthouse, and he was there. And when you meet somebody like that on a job, it makes the job so much easier because you're not just talking about acting and bullshit. You're talking about shit you actually care about, you know. So yeah, I don't know. And like, you know, even like musically and with my little radio show I do on the Lot Radio and stuff, it's there's still that like searching. There's still um that feeling of like I don't know shit. And that's okay because that opens up a world of possibilities. You know, like I was talking to my son about it's like why are you always buying records or some shit? And I kind of like misquoted the Cramps, you can't drink it all, but it's fun to try. And I said, well, you know, you can't buy them all, but it's fun to try. And now I get to talk to my kid about music, and I say, you know, just pick out the record by the cover. Like, it doesn't matter what's on the record. Like, let's start with like the album art and like see what you're drawn to. And, you know, so I get to introduce him to stuff. He gets to remind me about things like Eminem and Billie Eilish and things that I don't generally listen to. But
Why does
it's,
9-year-olds love Eminem? It's like,
I think it's the cursing,
I think
right?
it's the
It's got to be the
speed too.
curse.
It's also like how
Yeah.
fast he's going.
Yeah. Um, so that's fun. You know, sometimes I find like I rarely buy records online. It's mostly in person. Like if I if there's something that just like I fucking can't find and it's driving me crazy, I might buy one record a year offline, you know, from Discogs or something because it's just driving me nuts. But and for me, Spotify is overwhelming. I don't know. There's too much. I don't even know where to fucking start, right? So I just start with some shit I've listened to a million times, like Joy Division, right? Because I'm like, all right, I need to kill an hour, Joy Division or Dinosaur Jr. or something. I can't do like new this week or whatever. There's so much to catch up on that I can't invest more time into listening to the new stuff. So it's still like, okay, let's go to the record store. Oh, here's this like Terry Riley record I've always heard about, but I've never actually dove into. Let's get that. And then we'll see how that kind of like develops itself into like an hour-long radio show or 2 hour long radio show, you know, and that can go in so many different directions. But it's still this like searching and this kind of, you know, I'll always feel like a poser. I'll always feel like I don't, and this is in all aspects of life, from acting to art gallery shit to music shit. And it's not poser necessarily with like a super negative connotation. It's just I'll always be like curious and just like maybe not fit in exactly, but I'm not there in I'm just there in like a curious way. Like especially when it comes to like the punk shows and stuff that I go to, like in New York, a lot of times I'm like on the older side. I don't dress the part. I pretty much wear the same thing every day, and I kind of stand out. But then they'll see me talking with the bands and they'll be like, oh, this weird old dude, maybe he knows something about something, you know. Um, and it's like I go because I need the energy that that music brings to keep me awake, kind of a thing. You know, like the older you get, like I can't go watch like a orchestra or like, you know, I love Brian Eno and things like that. But if I want to go out at night and fucking get pumped, I'll go to like something a little more aggressive.
Well, you brought up Dinosaur Jr. and I guess our mutual friend Lou Barlow. Uh, he's always kind of told me he was like one of the first people involved in kids. Like Harmony would come to him and say, "I'm going to write a screenplay." He would come to Sebadoh shows and then
Yeah.
showed up with a screenplay and then showed up with Larry and then that he was in castings and that he was like really very involved from the very beginning. How far into the project did you kind of get cast?
Oh, it was, hmm, I was like a late casting. So, uh, and before I go into that, I will say that I think the kids' soundtrack is better than the movie.
I I I think they're both incredible for very different reasons, and one I
Yeah,
can watch, one I can enjoy a lot more frequently because the other one's a little more hard to get through
yeah.
sometimes. So
But just that, and I think a lot of that soundtrack had to do with harmony. Like Larry's more of like a blues guy. Like
mm.
he likes like jazz and blues and folk, and his son is actually a punker. Um, so his son introduces him to like a lot of that kind of music. But harmony, you also have to remember there was a store called Other Music in New York, which was incredible. It was like I don't know, like I don't know if Amoeba Records is like a good comparison or something. But it just had incredible taste. Everybody that worked there was super knowledgeable. Um, you could find all kinds of weird shit there. And Harmony definitely hung out there and was 19 and curious and going to see a lot of shows and stuff. So I want to say like 90% of that soundtrack was probably like Harmony showing Larry stuff.
I think it's Lou. If I don't mean
Okay, but
to speak out of turn, I think Harmony and I think like Lou was the guy saying like Daniel Johnson and get this stuff on there, but they were sending him rushes of the film and being like write a song like this for this part.
yeah. Um, so like at the time of the filming, right? Like I knew who Gravediggers were because I was like kind of a hip hop kid, right? And we hip hop kids had Stretch and Bobbito. That was our holy grail. That's every, I believe it was Thursday night from like 10 to 2 in the morning or whatever, you would tape Stretch and Bobbito and get introduced to all the new hip hop. And so I didn't know Folk Implosion or Sebadoh or any of that stuff, I don't think. Maybe I'd heard a little bit of it just from being around Harmony and going to his apartment and stuff, but it was way too over my head for being like a 16-year-old kind of like backpack rap kid. Like, you know, I was listening to like Organized Confusion and like MF Doom and like Tribe Called Quest and stuff. I wasn't ready to understand Daniel Johnston. Or maybe even Sonic Youth was like a little outside of my comfort zone, which now Sonic Youth sounds very like enjoyable, easy listening music. And I'm more of a like a Chicone Youth fan. You know, I'm like, oh, I like the more experimental stuff. Um, but so the film, so I think there's a photo of me, which I don't remember at the time. There's a photo of me on the actual casting um flyer that would be around New York City. And I'm wearing like this crazy oversized outfit. I'm really little. I think I'm 14 in the photo. So I was talking to Larry at that point when I was 14. And it was always understood that I was supposed to play a part in the film that Harmony ended up playing of the kid who gives Chloe or Jenny the drugs at the tunnel, which I'd already been going to the tunnel, which was a fantastic place. And so they had this one kid. I forget his name. He aged out. He hit puberty. He kind of within the 2 years it took to get the funding, his total look had changed. So he was out, and then they were going to use this friend of mine named Quim Cardona, who's a pro skateboarder. But his mom actually knew who Larry Clark was and was like, no fucking way, kind of a thing. And then I really have no idea how this happened, but Larry's like, oh, maybe Leo could do it. And I feel like my voice has gotten better. I've grown more comfortable in my skin. At that time, I can understand why the film executives would be like, that's the guy you want? Like, we don't, the fuck, that guy's like, it just, my voice was so crazy. And like, the, I remember this would happen for a long time where people would ask me if I'd ever been deaf
Oh my God.
because of the way I speak and stuff. Like, they thought like I was late to language because of the way I talked.
You realize in the
And
wake of that movie, people tried to talk like you in Toronto. There were like kids that would affect the way you spoke and
oh
almost like
God.
a some sort of perceived
Well, I
fiction.
remember there was this thing everybody would say stoops. That was like meant stupid, like stoops. And I remember that catching on a little too much and being like, oh God, like that's the thing that people took. Which was probably started by this guy, Stephen Callis, who was supposed to be in the movie but got locked up before it was shooting. So so me and Chloe were like the last minute additions to the film. They had flown out another actress to play Chloe's part. She didn't fit in. And so at the last, I think it was like literally 2 weeks before the film started, me and Chloe got put in those positions. And not only did I not look or sound the part, I had never acted before. And so the Hollywood studio, rightly so, was like kind of nervous. They're like, so we're going to bankroll this movie with a bunch of non-actors and it's going to work. And Larry's like, yeah, you know. And so I remember me and Justin had to remember the entire script and be able to um, do the entire script without looking at it for an hour and a half. And Harmony was such a good writer that we were able to. Like, because the studio just didn't trust that we could remember our lines. So I remember they gave me a script and they're like, come back tomorrow and know the entire script. And again, like, I'm not sure why, but I didn't drink or anything at this time. So I was able to do those things, but I was also kind of the black sheep on the set. I was sort of like Larry's boy, and I was not really accepted by Justin. I mean, like guys like Harold Hunter and shit were always cool, but like me and Justin really didn't get along during that whole shoot. And like uh we would get into it. Like we had little like 16-year-old egos, you know? And Larry would be like, what are you guys doing? You're supposed to be fucking best friends in this film. And yet I have to like break up fist fights. Like, what do you and me and Justin would become friends after the film, like, you know, after it came out. I think we were all just very young and kind of like didn't really know what to do about this thing we'd gotten ourselves involved in, you know. We didn't, nobody knew what it was going to become. Uh it was just something to do for that summer.
Well, Leo, I could talk to you forever. And anytime you want to come back on this show and talk about music, I didn't even ask you about you playing Culture Side on the radio show, which
Oh
blew
yeah.
my fucking mind.
Yeah. I
So,
love Mark Flood or Perry Webb or any of his many aliases. Like Mark, to me, is a real inspiration.
well, anytime you want to come back and talk about this stuff, you're always welcome.
Yeah, I'd love to. And again, I know I can talk a little too much, and I'm sorry we didn't get to talk much about music, but maybe it just lays the foundation for the next conversation.